Okay, testing the mic once again. 1, 2, 3. Everybody can hear me? Can somebody put a thumbs up if you can hear me? Say yes. Nobody is putting a thumbs up. Ah, there's one. Okay, awesome. Well done. Good job. Thank you, Oshri Kosha. Awesome. Okay, so my name is Rosita, and I'll be helping out with today's session to moderate the session. Perhaps, so if you have any questions, feel free to put in our chat box. I don't want to keep everybody waiting too long. With us today is we're very blessed to have Prof. Yawen from National Taiwan University. And without further ado, please welcome Prof. Yawen with your presentation.
Thank you, Rosita, and also the colleagues at the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health in Malaysia. It's really my great pleasure to be invited to give this talk. I will try to limit my talk within 40 minutes. So I will try to leave some time for audience to raise questions. If you have any questions, please say at the end. So the title today is Responses to Work-Related Mental Disorders, Experiences of Taiwan and Comparative Analysis with European Countries. The talk will be divided in 3 parts. So at first, I will give you a very quick background about the issues or the background information regarding work-related mental health issues in Taiwan. And the second part is more academic. I will try to show some empirical findings based on studies in Taiwan. And the main focus of today is to present policy actions in Taiwan to address work-related mental disorders. And we try to understand more about what are common and what are different from the international comparative perspective. So let's take a look of the background. It's not moving. The slide is not moving. So I'm happy to share the PowerPoint slides with all the participants. Not moving.
Hang on a minute. Give it some time. Okay. Is this correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Next. Okay. Taiwan has a population of 23.3 million, much smaller than population in Malaysia, and the population is aging very quickly. So currently, we have 20% of population age over 65, and it's aging very quickly. And also, we have some about 0.8 million people coming from other countries, foreign laborers. They come mainly on the contract basis. And Taiwan is also notorious about the very, very low fertility rate of 0.86. It's considered one of the lowest around the world. And the economy is dominated by service sector. Thanks. Okay, so okay. And in terms of working hours, as this slide indicates, when a country go more wealthy, the average working hours tend to decrease. But there are some exceptions, like Singapore has a very long working hours. And actually, Taiwan is in the middle. But when we check the slide, it can be shown that many East Asian countries have very long working hours. And in terms of collective powers of workers, as this slide shows, the data is from OECD database. We can see that most of the European countries have higher level of union density. And we don't have data for Taiwan in this slide, but if we check our official statistic, we can see that the union density rate of Taiwan is 7.8. So it's quite low as compared to most of the OECD countries. And another indicator is the percentage of employees covered by a collective agreement. We do not have official statistics from Taiwan but some informal statistics show that collective agreement is very uncommon. It's very uncommon in Taiwan. In contrast, in most of the European countries, they had a much higher percentage of workers being covered by a collective agreement. So that indicates that in Taiwan, workers are more individualized, not unionized. Okay. In terms of the cultural aspects, if we check the two indicators, one is level of individualism, another one is the level of power distance. So individualism measures the extent how the society prioritize individual autonomy or individual growth. So as we can see from this slide, many European countries rank higher in individualism scale. In terms of power distance, we can see that some countries have a higher degree of power distance, including at the right-hand side. Most of the Eastern Asian countries, including Taiwan, have a greater extent in power distance. Okay. So it suggests that in European countries that workers may prioritize their autonomy, but in Asian countries, group level harmony is being prioritized. In terms of power distance, European countries, the workplace could be more like equal in terms of the power relationship, but as this slide shows, in Asian countries, the workplace may have different type of workplace culture. Okay, and let's move to the mental health risk. One of the major indicator is suicide mortality rate. As you can see from this slide, Taiwan has a higher, low, the mortality, suicide mortality is considered high. And when we check the data, Malaysia has a much lower suicide mortality rate. So this indicates that mental health problem could be more severe in Taiwan. And then let's take a look at the gender-specific and age-specific suicide mortality. So this slide shows some fluctuation over time, but overall, men in their middle age were considered high risk in suicide risk. Okay, men. Okay, so this slide tried to briefly explain the development of policy related to psychosocial risk at work. So from my own observation, I think policies have evolved at different stages. So at around 2002, as you can see, what I have on here, pointer is here. Okay, so around 2002, there are controversies about how to recognize overwork-related issues. Okay. Okay, so this photo shows the governments are considering how to recognize overwork deaths, whether or not they should be considered work-related or not. And in 2008, there's issues about workplace depression. So some NGOs advocate for criteria being passed. And then, so this is kind of the first stage of policy development. So the focus is how to recognize the work-relatedness of mental health-related diseases, including sudden death, cardiovascular disease due to stress, and major depression. But in this next stage, because of the like a protest from workers group, so the government started to initiate some regulations focusing on working hour, rest time, and then later about the workplace violence, especially in healthcare sectors where workplace violence are more prevalent. And later on, in the third stage, because of some events, and especially last year, we had an issue, a case of the suicide event occurred inside the Ministry of Labor. So this event, is widely publicized by the media, and it resonates with many workers. So anti-bullying protests have been ongoing since last year. So recently, government is drafting a new chapter inside the OSH Act to incorporate the anti-bullying procedure. And in this year, recently, a flight attendant died after her shift, and the reason has been found to be working under illness. So this attendant, because of lack of sick leave benefit, she cannot apply and have the sick leave during the work shift, and sadly, she died after her work. So this event had been publicized recently, and the government and the company have to make the public apologize to the death. Okay, so it's likely that the sick leave benefit will become a new issue in our policy. Okay. So this is the first part. So in summary, we can see that the working hours is very long, and mental health is a issue. Not only in the population, but in the workplace. And then we can see some policy being developed over the past 20 years. Okay. So the second part, I would like to talk about our empirical findings on this issue. So psychosocial work hazard actually is a new concept in Taiwan. If we study this issue, usually we will have to make a clear definition what they mean. Okay. So psychosocial work hazard can be defined differently. So the ILO defined this term with the interaction of job content, work organization, management, and other environmental and organizational conditions with employees' competence and need. So this definition emphasizes environment and person fit, the balance between environment and personal competence. And another definition play more emphasis on working conditions. So Cox defined psychosocial work hazard as aspect of the design and management of work and its social and organizational context that have the potential for causing psychosocial or physical harm. So our study we tend to adapt the second definition, paying more attention on psychosocial work conditions. Okay, so work condition can lead to poor health through two major pathways. One is related to material aspect, another is about psychosocial mechanisms. So material deprivation, hazardous exposures has been the main focus of all research. So we study, for instance, a lack of protection gears or exposure to dangerous equipment, etc. So those are material through material mechanisms leading to poor health. Psychosocial mechanisms have not been emphasized in the past, at least in Taiwan. So stress could cause physiological responses and psychological responses and behavior and social responses like heavy smoking or abnormal eating problems, etc. Those are behavior that could be related to stress. And social responses include lack of morale or increase in absenteeism or intention to leave. Those are behavior problem and could cause social consequences. So we can understand the relationship using this figure. So the first box indicates the psychosocial work conditions, and then we can study further what kind of workplace hazards, psychosocial workplace hazards could be prevalent in certain occupation or work sectors. So there are plenty of possible stresses. And then those stresses could, through psychological mechanisms, lead to health outcomes. health outcomes could be divided further into reversible or irreversible outcomes. Reversible health outcomes include something that could be recovered, such as blood pressure changes or behavior changes, etc. But irreversible outcomes will include like a cardio attack or a major depression or even injuries. So how could we develop intervention at different stages? So primary intervention will focus on work conditions and trying to remove or improve the working condition. Second, prevention will focus on the early health problems. And tertiary prevention will try to develop a policy to help those who have already developed health problems. In this field, there have been some theoretical models being developed. So this slide summarizes the timeline of the development over time. So I won't go into the detail, but in short, we try to understand about this series in order to deepen our understanding about psychosocial stress and work conditions. So in Taiwan, I've been involved in some national surveys conducted by the Ministry of Labor. The Ministry of Labor have conducted national surveys every 3 to 4 years since 1994 up until now. Although there are some changes in sampling methods, but the samples are considered representative of the overall, the whole working population. And in these surveys, we adopted standardized questionnaires, and those questionnaires were delivered to a household, and on-site checking are performed by trained interviewers. So the message is considered quite standardized and quite rigid. Okay. And then starting from 2001, we started to have questions on psychosocial work conditions and mental health problems. And I had helped the government to incorporate some questionnaire skills, which are valid, like widely used in international literatures, like a demand control model and also the workplace justice models. So we developed the Chinese version and we conducted validation studies. So those questionnaires has been used, not just in national surveys, but also adopted by domestic researchers. So this slide, so the following few slides, I will try to provide some data from our study. So this slide summarizes the distribution of working hours, job demand, job control, work shift, job insecurity, and level of workplace justice. So the summary is provided at the bottom of the slide. So among employees, job demand and job controls increase with employment grade. When people have the higher grade, they tend to have higher demand and higher control. Insecurity is more prevalent among workers of lowest employment grade. That is quite understandable. And among self-employed, self-accounted workers, working hours are unevenly distributed, which means that some self-employed workers work very long hours, but some of them working insufficient working hours. Irregular shifts were also prevalent. So from the table, we can try to understand the social inequality in those work conditions. And we have conducted a questionnaire, case control study, and this study has been widely discussed in policies because at the early period, policy makers and worker groups are very concerned about the long working hours. So this study shows that working hours are longer than 60 hours per week are associated with increased risk of cardiovascular diseases. And sleeping hours less than 6 hours per day is associated with increased risk for cardiovascular disease. So this study has provided some evidence for policy discussion showing that the long working hours is harmful. And then because of policy focus on working hours, so we provide statistics showing that the high risk occupations for long working hours, and plus, in addition to long working hours, which population will have more higher prevalence of irregular shift. So we provide some empirical evidence showing that these type of working groups are at high risk for cardiovascular diseases because they are working long hours and they tend to work irregularly. Okay. And then we also conducted some surveys using workplace justice scale. And then we show that when workers have the low workplace justice, after they develop cardiovascular disease, they are less likely to return back to work. Then the policy focus on working hours and then moved to workplace violence. So these empirical data are also relevant for policy discussion. So we analyze data, our national data, to show the prevalence of workplace violence. We divided into different types of violence. So as shown in this slide, verbal violence is quite prevalent, and it seems it's been increasing. And we identified the workers who are at higher risk for workplace violence. So by type of occupation, in male population, certain type of work have a higher rate of workplace violence. In female workers, it suggests that the data shows that the healthcare sectors, finance and commercial sectors, consumer service and sales sectors are having higher risk for workplace justice. And interestingly, we found that the public sectors has much higher prevalence of workplace violence as compared to private sectors. And then we also analyze different types of psychosocial work conditions and then to see their association with workplace violence. So these studies provide evidence for more targeted interventions. And then study also support the hypothesis that workplace violences are associated with poor health. And then we identified, we found that psychological violence appear to have a stronger association with poor health as compared to physical violence. And then we found a very special group, which are workers injured at work or being ill because of work. During their compensation process, they could have multiple stressors. And we found that among this special type of group of workers, the injured workers, many of them, like the second point, many of them experience a high risk of mental disorder, including PTSD, especially workers who have encountered severe injuries or being traumatized by the workplace event. They are prone to developing PTSD. And then major depression, even suicidal intention have been observed in our studies. So because of these studies, we understand that injured workers should be protected, not just to help them to recover from the injury, but we also need to pay attention to their mental health risk. Okay, so this slide briefly summarize our some findings. We document the trends, and then we present distribution regarding psychosocial work hazard using our national survey data. Okay, and then we try to we identify high-risk groups for mental health problems, including workers who have insufficient sleep time, long working hours, irregular work shift, workers with precarious employment, which are shown in other studies, workers with lower workplace justice, workers experiencing workplace violence, and female workers with work-family conflicts, workers after experiencing work-related injuries and diseases. These groups are a high-risk group for mental health problems, so they should be like prioritized in our public health intervention. So I think empirical evidence are important to guide the policy development, and we are trying hard to provide evidence to our government. Okay, so the third part, I like to have some discussion about policy development in Taiwan, and try to do some comparative analysis with international experiences. So based on the articles published by Australian researchers Lamont, they propose that there are three types of approaches to workplace mental health. The first approach is to prevent harm. In other words, we should try to reduce or remove stressors from the workplace. So examples are like try to prevent bullying through good work organization, and or to reduce excess work demands, or try to reduce job insecurity. In other words, the first approach is try to remove negative elements from the workplace. And the second approach is to promote the positive, like to make the workplace more supportive or more cohesive, and so there are some examples. And the third approach is to manage illness. When workers develop diseases, we could try to develop some intervention to early diagnose the problems, and then provide appropriate assistance to workers who are in need, such as psychological counseling or return to work assistance, etc. But I feel that this concept may not be that it still have some limitation. I think one of the limitation is that the authors did not elaborate on the enforcement mechanisms. So it seems that we have to rely on the companies and the workers to initiate. But as we had discussed in the first part, the unionization rate is very low and working hours is very, very long. So we still think that the government should play an essential role in enforcing those initiatives. So because I've been studying OSH systems, so I think it is essential to incorporate mental health concept into the existing OSH systems. Okay, so beside the workplace situation, we should consider how the government can function better to incorporate the mental health concept. So I divided this OSH systems into A, B, C, D parts. So the A part, regulation, in my presentation in the next slide, I will explain how the regulation has been modified to address mental health issues in Taiwan. And then the B, to enforce the regulation, we will have to strengthen labor inspection mechanism, and how labor inspection has incorporated the mental health component. I will explain later. And the C is about the reporting and recognition. So how can we early diagnose mental health problems when event or health problems occur? Is there any way to early diagnose or to find out the problem? So we study the Danish system, and we are writing a paper on this issue, how to report, how to recognize work-related mental disorders. So, and we have written articles in Chinese, and it's been under review. So we try to understand better about European system and try to adapt the system into this part in Taiwan. And lastly, D is about compensation and rehabilitation, which means that when workers develop mental health problems like major depression and even like a major mental health disease, how can we compensate or provide assistance to help them return back to work? So let's move to the first part, regulation. So actually in Taiwan, the regulations, I would say, is still quite limited as compared to European policies. So we can see from this slide, so a Labor Standard Act has been modified in response to public attention to the workplace problem, but mainly on working hours issues. So since 2011, there's been some amendment in Labor Standard Act, including increased fine to workers who companies who are caught non-compliance. So the fine has been increased by 5-fold, and then the normal working hours used to be 48, but it's been gradually reduced. So in 2016, the normal hours is being reduced to 40 hours per week. And there are some changes in terms of overtime limit and day off and rest time. And recently, there are some changes in working hour flexibility. Okay. So Labor Standard Act just focus on working hours related issues. And OSH Act has been modified since 2011, mainly, first of all, on the health screening systems. So in 2011, the government revised the regulation imposing employees to conduct more thorough health screenings targeting cardiovascular risk. And later, in 2013, there was a major reform, and many clauses in OSH Act has been revised, including 2 clauses, which ask the employers to prevent, first of all, unusual workload such as night shift, rotation shift, long working hours, and then secondly, a new law asking the employers to prevent intrusion on employees' physical and mental health caused by misconduct by others. Okay, it's very complicated. The wording is very complicated, but in short, it's applied workplace violence, and later being interpreted as misconduct include bullying, harassment, etc. So the explanation has been expanded to cover the wider aspect of the workplace conflict. Okay. And then right now, the Congress is reviewing the new amendment, which include a new chapter specific for workplace bullying. So the employers will be asked to set up some procedures and reporting system, investigation system, etc. But there are some opposition from company side, so it's still ongoing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The B part is about labor inspection, and I think labor inspection power has been expanded, but still insufficient. The manpower and resources are still quite insufficient. So they adopt a reactive approach, which means that whenever misconduct or complaints are raised, inspectors will go to the company to conduct investigations. But on the normal situation, they are less likely to take a proactive approach to do active investigation. And the focus of the labor inspection is still on compliance of working hours regulation, overtime pay, and employment relations. And they actually are reluctant to conduct investigation into psychosocial problems because is more complicated and they are not trained on this issue. So there are a great deal of resistance from labor inspection bureaus. But because public attention are on workplace bullying, so the society play pressure on government to strengthen labor inspection on psychosocial issues. Next slide. It's not working from the side. Okay, so the third part is about reporting and recognition. So we have conducted some more thorough studies on this aspect by comparing the Danish system. When workers develop possible work-related mental disorders, how can we identify them? Okay. So in Denmark, they ask physicians, not just employers, have the responsibility to report work-related events, but also physicians. So healthcare providers, when they suspect their patients are having work-related health problems, including mental health problems, they are required by law to report. I think this is a very proactive. So we are trying to convince our government to adapt this kind of policy. So actors in Taiwan, only employers have the responsibility to report. But in other countries, like in many European countries, actually not just Denmark, but also some other European countries, they ask healthcare providers to report. So I think this is something we can learn. And then in terms of diagnostic prerequisites, in Taiwan, there are very strict criteria. So in order to be recognized as work-related, you have to pass several psychological tests, and you have to get a document and diagnosis from physicians, psychiatrists. But in Denmark, they just report if physicians suspect, they have a good reason to suspect the problem is related to what they can report. Okay. In Taiwan, physicians are reluctant to report because they feel the legal responsibility and they are afraid of getting into legal trouble. Okay. Because the document, the diagnosis is like a major evidence. But in Denmark, they separate these two parts. The recognition is conducted by governmental officials. So physicians do not have to get involved into the legal procedure. I think this design will help to solve some problems that we encounter in Taiwan. So the causality assessment and whether or not to give compensation to workers are decided by the official labor authorities, not physician or any other gatekeepers. And recognition criteria especially is complicated. So we study the approval rate because in Denmark, many cases are being reported. So the criteria, the approval is somehow much lower. But in Taiwan, because patients will have to go through a very detailed procedures. So once they pass certain stage and being reported, formally, officially reported, the approval rate tend to be much higher. Okay. But the absolute number is small. Okay. And then we study compensation, whether or not the workers will receive a replacement, wage replacement, or other financial compensation, whether their job has been secure or not. And we found that in Denmark, employers, companies can fire the workers more easily because they have other systems to protect the workers. Okay, so when workers feel unfit in the workplace, they tend to leave the workplace. And then the social security system provide a better protection. Okay. So that kind of solved some employment conflicts. But in Taiwan, once the workers are being recognized as having work-related disease, the companies cannot fire. Okay, it's by law, the company will have to keep workers at least 2 years during the the treatment period. So the companies would be very unhappy or very reluctant to help workers to be recognized as having work-related disorders. So we find that there are differences and different policies could have some impact on employment relationship. Okay, and then we also study how the recognition contribute to workplace investigation. We found that in Denmark, all the reported statistics provide some feedback to labor inspection system, so they understand which part of the workplace are having higher reported rate. So they will design their investigation strategies accordingly. But they will not target the workplace where workers reported health problems. So by doing so, they avoid some resistance from the company side. So they will not target that specific companies. Instead, they target the sector-wise intervention. I think this is also a very good policy to avoid some resistance from companies. So so that is for the reporting part. Lastly, about compensation in rehabilitation. So in Taiwan, stress-related cardiovascular diseases were started to be recognized since 1991, and stress-related mental disorders were recognized since 2008. Okay. And compensation criteria for these two types of diseases has been developed and have gone several amendments ever since. Okay. And then we have a new law passed in 2021. Actually, I have spent a lot of time doing research about the worker compensation insurance program, and finally we revised the system, and there's some progress, but there's still some limitation. Okay. So this slide shows the numbers of cases being recognized as work-related cardiovascular disease and work-related mental disorders. As I mentioned, the law, the criteria passed back in 2001 and 2008 for these two types of diseases, but cases started to emerge much later. Okay, so this slide shows the numbers. Still, we have very small number of work-related mental disorders, only 10 in year 2021. And we compare Denmark and Taiwan and about work-related mental disorders. As you can see that as I showed that only 10 in 2021, 10 cases are being recognized and compensated. And how about a claim? How many people reported? The numbers are very, very small. But once they are reported, usually the approval rate is much higher. It's about 20 something to 55. Okay. In Denmark, many cases are being filed. Those are mainly through decisions. So more than like 5,000 in year 2023 were reported, and among them, 256 were compensated. Okay, so the size is much, much bigger. I think the reporting system play a big role in the number of compensated cases. Okay, so the last few slides, I try to summarize what we found specific about Taiwan's policies. I think the government and society are becoming more aware about psychosocial issues and mental health issues at work because of the occurrence of some tragic events like a sudden death or work-related suicide caused by bullying. And recently, there are a lot of development because of attention to those events. But I would say that other type of work-related mental disorders are less visible, like minor depression and psychosomatic disorders, which could be related to mental health problems. But many workers are less likely to report their psychological situation. But the stress-related issues could be, presented in other forms, like more psychosomatic or like a cardiovascular or some other kind of diseases. And then those events usually occurred in big companies or in governmental sectors. Then people who are precariously employed, like platform workers or self-accounted workers, there are fewer studies and they are not being covered by our law regulation and social security systems. But they are having some studies shows that they have the higher mental health problems, but they are less likely to be, their situation are less likely to be addressed. And policy action has been involved in following areas: compensation, prevention, mental health services. So there are a lot of progress in Taiwan. And when we look around at what the European countries have developed, we found that they are more active in prevention. So the EU regulations required all employers to conduct risk assessments, okay, which include psychosocial workplace hazards. And then they encourage social dialogues between enterprises and social partners like unions and some like other groups to discuss psychosocial risks. And in Taiwan, it's very, very limited. Okay. And in some European countries, including Denmark, they have included the psychosocial aspect in their labor inspection. But in Taiwan, we found a great resistance on this part. In terms of reporting and recognition, we found that in many European countries, they have established a more active reporting system to recognize, to identify suspected or related mental disorders. Okay. And then the data contribute back to the system to guide workplace intervention strategy. And in terms of handling illness, in Taiwan, we do have a good healthcare system. So the access to mental health care can be ensured. But other aspects like employment-related welfare, including sick leave benefit, employment protection, these parts are less developed. But in European countries, we also find that they have different systems. The employment protection may not be so ensured. For instance, in Denmark, it's quite flexible. Workers can be fired more easily, but they secure their social security benefit, including healthcare and sick leave benefit, financial benefits are being protected. So in conclusion, I think mental health issues have been a major occupational health concern around the world. Mental health risks of certain populations are still under study, including the following type of workers. And I think all countries will have to consider their context-specific issues and should be consider these issues into the theoretical framework, as we know that those frameworks are developed mainly in European countries or Western countries. So some cultural or context-specific elements to be considered in our own study. And then regulation, social protection system should be strengthened in Taiwan and maybe in other countries. So that's the end of my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any question you may have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Prof. We let you have a bit of a drink first, but for the time being, there is no question in the chat box yet. But I think we have one or two queries from our colleagues, Ms. George, perhaps Mr. Nizam, if you have any questions you want to ask Prof. I have my own kind of like wanted to find out about the statistics. Yeah? When you say, oh, there is a number of statistics, but can we also say that when people do not report, it doesn't mean that it's not there, right? So the number could be small, not necessarily because, oh, there is no case, but maybe because it's not yet being reported, and because of the process of reporting takes some what do you call it, process, a long process. So how can we, like, if you can see Denmark just now, the statistic is, I think the awareness is there for them to report the case and so forth. Yeah. But in our region, it seems like hang on, should I report? You know, that kind of thing. So what's your comment on that?
Yeah, okay, can you turn the to page 35,
Slide 35.
slide 35,
Can we go back to slide 35?
showing the figure?
Sure.
Okay. So if we look at, it's hard to compare mental health situation across countries because people use a different, have different perception or have different measures.
Yeah.
Okay. But if we use a very rigid indicator like a suicide mortality,
Yeah.
actually, Taiwan's suicide mortality is actually quite high.
Okay, all right.
But reported case is very small. So when
Mm.
you look at the European countries, the mortality rate is lower.
Mhm.
Of course, suicide mortality is too extreme and it's being totally influenced by many factors like aging, sickness, health situation. There are many factors contributing to suicide. It's difficult to really make a direct comparison.
Yeah.
But it seems to suggest that the mental health problem actually is quite severe in Taiwan. And from our feeling, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's increasing. Okay. But if you look at the reported cases, the number is so small.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are many reasons why workers dare not to report their mental health problem. Okay. Because they could face the resistance from company.
Correct.
So we have to address that issue. They are afraid of being laid off.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are many factors.
Yeah.
Okay. So in my report, we only focus on how can policy improve in trying to reduce the barriers.
Yeah.
Okay. And try to encourage people to report.
Exactly.
So I think Denmark is a good example. They encourage, they not encourage, they required.
Yeah.
Is an obligation for
I
decision
see.
to report.
Requires like mandatory?
Mandatory.
I
They
see.
could be fined.
I see.
Of course, when we ask our Danish colleagues whether or not a physician could be fined by not reporting the cases, it's very rare. But by law, it's written.
I see.
So they have the kind of obligation. If they have a strong suspicion that these patients have the disease because of work, not just for mental health, but for other kind of physical or mental problems, they are required to report.
I see.
Okay, so I think this is something we could learn because in Taiwan we have the easy access to healthcare.
Yeah.
So workers, when they have problems, they can easily go to doctors.
Correct.
So if we can ask doctor to report and then ask protect doctors from a legal, complex problems, they will be a very important actor. So by doing so, we hope to increase the reported cases. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. So we can see that the only, very few of workers report.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we have similar setup like Taiwan. So we hope we're gonna learn from your plan here, and perhaps our occupational health doctors can perhaps do something about this as well. Yeah.
But I think not just occupational physician. In Denmark, they all general practitioners, general physicians have the obligation to report. But when they want to do further investigation, they may need to go to occupational physician.
I see.
But by reporting is required for all physicians.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a good point. Awesome. How about our friends, members? No? You okay? Any question? Any other question from YouTube? No? Platform? Okay. Right. Looks like everybody's happy with your presentation. Oh, there's one there. There is one dot there, but there's nothing in mind. Yeah. But I think it is not the end of the story here. I'm sure that there will be more kind of like conversation between our local members as well as Australian members. We hope to have more discussion with you perhaps online in future. So if it's not here, perhaps on another platform.
Yes.
I want to join everybody. Please join me to thank Prof. Loren today for today's session, and we look forward for more discussion and collaboration in the future. All right, awesome. And thank you for everybody who joined us from Korea. Wave a little bit. Hi. Oshri Kosha.
There's a chat, one chat there.
Oh, no, that one is the one that just
Oh,
now they were
okay,
testing
okay,
the sound
okay,
system inside.
okay.
Yeah. Hello.
감사합니다.
Bye bye.
Hi,
Okay.
thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, we will send it to you. We will send the slide to you.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, we can stop the recording. Yeah, there will be informative session. We will like to have more sessions.
Yes, yes, please. Yes.
From Kuala Lumpur.